Commander Sarah Chen stepped through the decontamination field and into the alien vessel, her boots echoing against the strange crystalline floor. 3 months of negotiations had led to this moment. First contact with the Vilethani, a species that had been observing humanity from the shadows of space for over 2 centuries. The interior of their ship defied human understanding of architecture. Walls curved impossibly, seeming to bend light itself, while bioluminescent patterns pulsed in rhythm with some unseen heartbeat. The air tasted of copper and ozone, filtered through atmospheric processors designed for beings who breathed a different mixture of gases. Ambassador Torres walked beside her, his diplomatic training evident in every measured step. Behind them, Dr. Elizabeth Reeves clutched her xenobiology scanner, its readings fluctuating wildly in the alien environment. The small human delegation had been invited aboard the Vilethani flagship, an honor that came after months of careful communication through mathematical concepts and basic pictographs. "Remember," Torres whispered, "they've been studying us for 200 years. We know almost nothing about them." Sarah nodded, though her attention was already focused ahead. Through the translucent walls, she could see the ship's central chamber approaching, a vast spherical room where their hosts waited. The Vilethani had insisted that only one representative from each species should make direct visual contact. First, Sarah, as mission commander, had volunteered for the honor. The chamber doors dilated like the iris of a massive eye, revealing the space beyond. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. The room was beautiful beyond description, walls of living crystal that seemed to sing with harmonious frequencies. And, at its center, a raised dais where a single figure waited. The Vilethani stood roughly 7 feet tall, with an elegant, elongated frame covered in what appeared to be silver-blue skin that shifted like liquid mercury. Her face, for Sarah immediately, since this being was female, was hauntingly beautiful with large eyes that held depths like the space between stars. Delicate appendages that might have been tendrils or hair flowed around her head like a crown of moonlight. Sarah approached the center of the chamber, following protocol, the alien being turned toward her and their eyes met across the crystalline expanse. In that instant, the Vilethani began to weep, not the tears Sarah knew, drops of saline rolling down cheeks, but something far more profound. The creature's entire form began to shimmer with waves of color that pulsed from deep indigo to brilliant gold, and a sound emerged from her throat like wind singing through crystal caves. It was undeniably the sound of mourning, of joy, of recognition, and of loss all woven together. Sarah stood frozen, unsure whether to approach or retreat. The tears, for that's what they were, she realized, fell upward from the alien's eyes, defying gravity to spiral around her form in glowing helixes before dissipating into sparkles of light. "Why," Sarah began, her voice barely a whisper, "why are you crying?" The Vilethani raised one graceful hand, and when she spoke, her words came not through sound, but directly into Sarah's mind, a gentle pressure, like warm sunlight on the inside of her skull. "Because you are so young," came the thought, filled with overwhelming sadness. "So beautiful and young and doomed, and you don't even know it yet." Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs. "What do you mean?" "Doomed. How?" The alien's form shimmered. Again, and Sarah felt waves of emotion that weren't her own washing over her, centuries of watching, of hoping, of growing despair. "We have seen your kind rise and fall across the galaxy," the Vilethani continued. 17 times we have watched. Species like yours emerge from their worlds, full of fire and dreams and the desperate need to reach for the stars. They burn so brightly, these young races. They love with such intensity, fight with such passion, create with such magnificent fury. Sarah felt tears starting in her own eyes now. And they all They consume themselves, came the reply, gentle but inexorable. Their very strengths become their weaknesses. The passion that drives them to greatness becomes the anger that destroys them. The love that builds their civilizations becomes the hatred that tears them down. The intelligence that lifts them to the stars becomes the weapon that ends them. "But we're different," Sarah protested, though even as she spoke, she thought of Earth's wars, its environmental collapse, the barely contained conflicts that had nearly prevented this mission from launching. "We've learned from our mistakes. We're trying to be better." The Vialthani's weeping intensified, colors cascading across her form like aurora. "That is what they all said, child. That is exactly what they all said." Sarah felt the weight of those words settling on her shoulders like a shroud. "How long?" she whispered. "How long do we have? If you follow the pattern, perhaps a century. Maybe two, if you are fortunate. You will expand too quickly, spread too thin. Your population will outgrow your wisdom. Your technology will outpace your compassion. And then what?" Sarah's voice was barely audible. "Then there will be silence, and we will mourn you as we have mourned all the others. And we will wait for the next bright species to emerge and make the same beautiful, terrible mistakes." Sarah stood in the crystal chamber, feeling the alien's sorrow washing over her in waves. But slowly, something else began to build in her chest. Not despair, but defiance. "No," she said, her voice growing stronger. "No, I don't accept that." The Vialthani's weeping paused, colors stilling on her form. "You've watched 17 species destroy themselves," Sarah continued, stepping closer. "But you've never tried to help them, have you? You just watched, you mourned, you waited." "We cannot interfere. It is not our way. We are observers, historians of tragedy." "Then maybe that's your mistake," Sarah said, her voice ringing in the crystalline chamber. "Maybe the pattern breaks when someone finally chooses to interfere, when someone decides that watching isn't enough anymore." The alien's massive eyes fixed on Sarah's face, and for the first time, the commander saw something besides sorrow there, a flicker of something that might have been hope. "You think you can change what seems inevitable?" "I think we have to try," Sarah replied. "Not just humanity, us, together. You have the wisdom of watching civilizations rise and fall. We have the fire you say always destroys us. But what if that fire could be guided instead of just burning wild?" The Vialthani stood silent for long moments, her form shifting through subtle hues of silver and blue. "You would make us complicit in either your salvation or your destruction." "Yes," Sarah said without hesitation, "because standing by and watching is also a choice, and maybe it's time for a different one." For the first time since Sarah had entered the chamber, the alien stopped crying. Instead, she stepped forward and extended one graceful hand. "Then let us begin," she said, "and hope that this time the story has a different ending." As their hands touched, Sarah felt the weight of 200 years of observation flowing into her, along with something else, the desperate hope that humanity might be the species that finally broke the pattern. That this time, the fire might illuminate rather than consume. The real work was just beginning.